Apple has dragged OpenAI into federal court in Northern California, accusing the AI lab of stealing its trade secrets. The Apple lawsuit blew the lid off the bitter behind-the-scenes rivalry, putting the battle for the future of AI on full public display. The lawsuit names OpenAI's hardware chief as a defendant, and Apple says he previously served as a vice president of product design at Apple, working on products including the iPhone and Apple Watch. Apple alleges that he used his knowledge of confidential Apple projects to question job candidates in ways that could pull more confidential information out of them. And here's the part that reads like a scene out of a spy movie. Apple says he told candidates still working at Apple to bring in actual hardware parts and prototypes for a little show and tell. Apple says this became a routine practice, and at least one candidate was reportedly surprised enough to say, "I didn't even know we were allowed to take these things out of the office." The real question is, normal business competition doesn't escalate to this level, with one side pulling such calculated, wide-ranging, and systematic stunts, and the other forced to use a lawsuit as its final weapon, unless it's a fight to the death where only one can walk away. Just 2 years ago, the two companies were on good enough terms to announce a high-profile partnership, integrating ChatGPT into the iPhone's operating system. Sam Altman even went to Apple's campus for the announcement, which made OpenAI look less like a threat to Apple and more like a powerful feature inside Apple's ecosystem. So what turned the warmth into a chill? Reports say the frost crept in the moment OpenAI announced it was jumping into hardware, buying I/O Products, the startup founded by former Apple designer Jony Ive, for $6.4 billion. From a mainstream media perspective, this wasn't just another startup acquisition. It was a shot across the bow signaling OpenAI's intent to strike at the heart of Apple's business. However, Apple likely views this differently. In their assessment, OpenAI simply jumped the gun, a strategic reality that any seasoned CEO familiar with the AI landscape knew was inevitable sooner or later, though it is a nuance we will have to untangle later. OpenAI took off before the starting gun even fired, and in the process, they shoved Apple along the way. That shove? It's all documented in the lawsuit. The rumors about OpenAI's hardware ambitions have been swirling, and back in April, analyst Ming-Chi Kuo reported that the company is building its own smartphone with a launch penciled in for around 2028. No major report has explained exactly what an OpenAI phone would look like, but the business model it points toward is very different from the iPhone model people use today. That matters because the current iPhone economy is still organized around apps. Gmail for email, Uber for rides, Amazon for shopping, with Apple's App Store sitting on top of it all, taking a cut of up to 30% on digital transactions. An AI phone would tear that whole model apart because the front door wouldn't be an app store at all. It would simply be whatever you happen to want in the moment. You just tell the AI what you need and it takes over from there. Your email gets stripped of the noise, so only the things that matter land in front of you. And when you want a ride, you say the word, and the AI quietly picks the best option out there. To put it simply, the app stops being the place the customer visits and becomes the background supplier the AI calls when it needs something done. That is why analysts say OpenAI wants to reduce its dependence on the iPhone and build a direct relationship with consumers. On the surface, this is an intellectual property case. Underneath it is a fight over who gets to control the first point of contact between ordinary people and artificial intelligence. Put it all together and you get a stunning reversal. Partners in 2024, sharpening the blade in 2025, and glaring at each other across a courtroom by 2026. So, what's the motive behind behavior this strange? Was it an aggressive land grab, or was OpenAI backed into a corner by Apple's strategy? Notice what that question has quietly turned into. Between Apple and OpenAI, who's on offense and who's on defense? Picture the two of them as fighters squared up in a ring. In one version, OpenAI throws punch after punch while Apple just covers up, blocking and blocking until OpenAI has punched itself out, and only then swings back. That's textbook defense. But there's another version, and it's a whole different story. OpenAI isn't really punching at all, it's just quietly sharpening its blade over in the corner, while Apple pins it down with one hand and quietly sharpens its own blade with the other. To figure out which one is real, we have to look at the brutal problem OpenAI was staring down in 2025. Because once you see it, you'll understand why the company was willing to burn its bridge with Apple just to start sharpening. Since 2025, OpenAI has been stuck burning through billions of dollars every single month, all while its rivals close in fast. Investors like Amazon, Nvidia, and SoftBank poured in a record $110 billion of fresh funding, And yet, even that looks nowhere near enough next to the trillions of dollars in future spending OpenAI has promised. Here's the thing about OpenAI. It's the face of this entire AI wave, running the fastest, grabbing the most attention, carrying the highest valuation. But to hold on to that lead and that valuation, it needs a grand story to tell. And so, OpenAI ended up trying to be three companies at once: the undisputed technology leader, the gateway to the user, and the compute platform giant. But the bigger the castle you set out to build, the wider the moat you have to dig. The technology lead is real, all right, but the gap between it and rivals like Gemini and Claude has only kept shrinking since 2025. And the dream of becoming the user gateway slams straight into a wall because the cost of serving each user runs far higher than what a revenue could ever cover. Think back to the Google era. You type in a search, Google hands you 10 blue links, and the cost of serving that search is pocket change next to the ad money it pulls in. GPT doesn't work that way because every single time a user hits it, it burns real money in electricity and chipware, and ad revenue simply can't foot that bill. Yes, inference will get cheaper and the models will get leaner, but user expectations are climbing at the very same speed. People have gone from asking about the weather to demanding, read these 200 pages, analyze this company, fix my code, generate a video. Charge users directly, and you'll never reach the sheer scale of Google or Android. And meanwhile, an endless ocean of open source models is churning below, turning the whole foundation into a commodity and handing price-sensitive users a cheap place to hide. Then there's the third road: lock the lead in place for good with a trillion-dollar build-out. And that road is turning out to be a bumpy one too. OpenAI isn't operating in some sleepy old hardware business like Detroit's big three automakers. Its opponents are the sharpest, most market-savvy internet giants on the planet: Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Meta. Before the AI wave had even fully formed, nearly every one of these giants threw its whole weight behind the technology, squeezing OpenAI's room to maneuver down to a razor-thin sliver. Gemini and Claude are chasing hard from behind, and even the open-source lane is jammed with heavyweights like Meta and DeepSeek. You can order the chips, plan the server racks, and announce the data centers. But what actually flips those GPUs on is power, land, transformers, grid permits, and cooling systems. And while the other models were still trailing ChatGPT, those were exactly the resources every IT giant was scrambling to grab. So something strange started to unfold. Roughly 50% of America's AI data center capacity has already slipped behind schedule. Yet the companies keep announcing brand new projects anyway. Inside Microsoft's most advanced data centers, racks of NVIDIA chips meant for training AI models are just sitting there, idle. Morgan Stanley and the Financial Times both point to the same order of magnitude. Between 2025 and 2028, America's new data center power demand could face a shortfall of around 45 gigawatts. For these old guard IT giants, there's a strange logic running underneath. If the data centers never get built, it's as good as if they'd all been built, because these giants can keep their old businesses humming for cash flow, then pour that money straight into their AI catch-up. And if the data centers all do get built, it's as good as if none of them had been, because then everyone can serve up AI, and OpenAI only pockets a thin technical premium on its tokens instead of the fat premium of being the scarce one in the room. All of this makes the race brutally expensive, which means OpenAI can't reshape the market with a trillion-dollar build-out before the old guard giants catch up. Technology leader, user gateway, compute platform giant, three roads, and not a single one with a wide moat dug around it. So on paper, OpenAI has just one road left: jump from AI on the computer to AI on the phone, into a market that's vastly bigger. That explains how few strategic options OpenAI has left, but it still doesn't explain the frantic timeline. Partners in 2024, sharpening the blade in 2025, hauled into court by 2026. To really make sense of it, we have to look through Apple's eyes and see just how little time the market was leaving OpenAI. In 2024, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon together pledged over $200 billion for AI infrastructure, and every serious analyst treats that number as the price of admission. Pay up or get out. Think about what it actually costs to stay in this race. You spend tens of billions building a data center, and the very second the building is finished, the models inside it are already behind. The next generation demands even more compute, so before your first data center has even opened its doors, you're already writing checks for the next one. Apple spent only around $10 billion and was out of the race before it had even stepped in. But that doesn't mean Apple lacks the technical muscle or the cash, just the opposite. Apple's cash flow is about the strongest of any tech giant out there. The big model companies all want to be the one and only gateway for every stream of digital traffic, and in that race, both Microsoft and Apple had fallen behind, and both were asking the same question: how do we claw the gateway traffic back? NVIDIA saw the answer clearly from the hardware side. Just drop a dedicated AI chip into the home computer, and most AI inference can happen right there on the device without needing to touch a data center. Apple and Qualcomm arrived at a similar conclusion from the phone side, and that conclusion rests on a few facts most people never even stop to notice. Say you ask your phone's AI to pick out a birthday gift for a friend. If the phone ships that request off to a data center to run, then your chat history with that friend, the photos you've snapped, all that backstory about your life probably gets bundled up and shipped out too. That's about the least private way you could possibly do it, but even harder to spot than the privacy problem is the slow bleed of time draining out of your life. On a device you touch 300 times a day, anything past 100 milliseconds, and you can already feel the lag and add up hundreds of millions of those tiny delays across a lifetime, and it comes out to hundreds of wasted days. And if every query, every question has to wait its turn in line on some server, the time you lose might have to be counted in years. For some tasks, that delay is simply a deal breaker: real-time voice translation, robot movement. But for Apple, the business logic cuts even deeper. Put an AI chip in the phone, and the higher price means the user is footing the bill for the compute, sparing Apple the cost of throwing up massive data centers. And when those chips crunch tasks locally, the data never even reaches the cloud, which keeps the profit locked inside Apple instead of leaking off to some AI software company. OpenAI figured out the threat of on-device computing very early, and it doesn't dare bet that one beefier server-side model is enough to make users walk away from the free little model already living on their phone. Apple's bet goes like this: push the AI on the phone side all the way to its limit, and cloud AI shrinks into something you can take or leave. As long as the iPhone owns the very first point of contact between human and machine, Apple gets to decide which AI the traffic flows to, the local one or the one in the cloud. To see why this matters in dollars and cents, think about what a spot like that is actually worth. Every time you need a ride, Uber appears. Every time you're about to buy, Amazon lays the goods out right in front of you, and neither one pays Apple a single cent for that prime piece of real estate in your life. Now imagine you ask Siri to buy you a Mac, and it handles the whole transaction while you never once find out which retailer was working behind the scenes. Over time, you might forget the Amazon website ever existed, as it quietly withers into a warehouse with a shipping department bolted on. And this business has one more piece that matters even more. If a huge chunk of AI shifts onto the phone, users shell out a few $100 extra for an AI iPhone with a beefed-up chip, more memory, a bigger battery, and better cooling. Apple pockets the hardware money and never has to sink hundreds of billions or trillions into building data centers the way OpenAI does. If the AI baked into the phone quietly polishes off 80% of daily tasks, that's the same as the data center's expected business dropping by 80%. And once the free on-device AI is good enough, who's still going to fork over $20 a month for ChatGPT? By now, the shape of Apple's strategy is clear. Let the users pay to build the data center that lives inside their own phones, and make a little money on the iPhone along the way. Intercept the AI service profits into your own hands, and keep the AI companies from ever laying a finger on the consumer. Leave a few crumbs for the big AI models to scramble for, and if the open source models turn out good enough, don't even leave the crumbs. Back in 2024, when AI was just finding its feet, the picture looked completely different. ChatGPT held a commanding lead, and a usable model squeezed down under 16 gigabytes, small enough for a phone's memory to shoulder, hadn't taken shape yet. So Apple partnering with OpenAI made all the sense in the world. OpenAI felt no pressure at all, and the road ahead looked bright. But by 2025, Gemini was visibly gaining ground, and all sorts of optimized small models that could run right on a phone started popping up. The upcoming Siri assistant on the iPhone is built on Google's technology. It runs on Gemini, not ChatGPT. Now yes, this came after OpenAI had already started secretly building its phone, but even if OpenAI had never laid a hand on hardware, Apple would have had plenty of reason to keep Gemini in its back pocket anyway. Keep in mind, almost every supply chain at a big company insists on a second source. The only way around that is if there's just one option sitting on the shelf, the way Asus and Dell have nothing but Windows 11 to load. But wouldn't you know it, there's already a line of rivals queuing up right behind ChatGPT. And just like that, the road OpenAI had counted on, borrowing the iPhone's pipeline to reach consumers, got sealed off by the sheer speed of the technology. Worse still, if it can't get past the iPhone, even OpenAI's plans to push into robotics start to grind to a halt. So going down and building a phone of its own, going toe-to-toe with the iPhone, started to look like the only card left on the table. Move fast enough, and OpenAI could turn into the Android of the phone world. But fall behind by even a single step, and most phone users might never lay eyes on OpenAI at all. And even if ChatGPT's tech is still humming away in the background, it'd play out just like how people never knew who actually built Siri. Once you grasp this kind of strategic pressure, those bizarre OpenAI moves lying in Apple's complaint suddenly snap right into focus. So now we understand why OpenAI was in such a rush to sharpen its blade against Apple. The root of it is that the surge of technology pressed a razor-sharp knife straight into Apple's hand. And Apple doesn't have to pay a dime for that knife, it even gets to turn a profit off it. That's what forced OpenAI to leap into a trap it could spot from a mile off, and to leap in a way that wasn't exactly graceful, handing Apple the very handle it needed to haul OpenAI into court. When Apple escalated the fight to a lawsuit, the main goal was never those few $100 million in damages. Time is the most expensive thing there is in the age of AI. Digging up a rival's trade secrets is one way to buy time. It's often illegal, but in a lot of business cases, courts tally up damages based on actual losses, not on the value of the time bought through those illegal means, because that time is impossible to put a number on. Yet both CEOs carry that number in the back of their minds. A lawsuit itself is often just a way to buy time, sometimes on offense, sometimes on defense, and cutting off a partnership is yet another way to buy time. Slow down a rival's strategic progress and it works out the same as speeding up your own. The exact same principle behind that data center bottleneck we walked through earlier. When both sides are staring down a life-or-death crisis, the fight spreads from a single point out across the whole board. The tactics just keep pouring out one after another, and the chapters still to come in this story are only going to get more jaw-dropping.